Hi, Guy Powell here, and welcome to the next episode of the backstory on the Shroud of Turin. If you haven't already done so, please visit guypowell.com and sign up for more episodes. Today we'll be talking with Pete Schumacher. We are on site in Alamogordo, New Mexico. He is one of the original STURP members and owner of the Shroud Exhibit and Museum in Alamogordo, New Mexico. And I think the ownership may actually be the wrong term, but please clarify that when we get there.
Okay.
As you can see, things are definitely a little bit different today. We're actually in Pete's church, and we're doing the recording. And so looking forward to some of the insights, or many of the insights that Pete has. Of course, I am the author of the newly released book, The Only Witness, A History of the Shroud of Turin. And it is a Christian historical fiction tracing a possible yet plausible history of the Shroud over the last 2 millennia. So let's get started. Let me tell you a little bit about Deacon Pete Schumacher. He is known as a VP8 engineer, and I'll talk a little bit about that. Although he didn't go to Turin, he was one of the original STURP members, and STURP, S-T-U-R-P, stands for Shroud of Turin Research Project. And he worked with John Jackson and others using the VP8 image analyzer. Now the VP8 image analyzer, we're going to talk about that right away. It is critical and one of the unique findings of what's on the Shroud. So Pete, tell us a little bit about your backstory on the Shroud and how you got involved in the Shroud of Turin.
Well, I got involved in the Shroud because I was a production manager for the VP8 image analyzer, and in 1976, two guys from the Air Force Academy were doing some research on the Shroud, and they didn't tell us that. They just said they were doing research on the Shroud, or pardon me, how do I say that? They were doing some research. They didn't tell us what the research was about, okay? Or didn't tell me about it anyway. And they wanted a VP8 system given to them or loaned to them so that they could do some studies on the Shroud. They looked for a volunteer to deliver the unit that was given to them or loaned to them, however that was, back in 1976, and volunteer to go deliver the instrument. I have a sister and a brother-in-law, two nephews and a niece that lived in Colorado Springs. So I said, hey, I'll go out there and deliver that. If you'll pay for the gas, I'm on my way. And that was how I wound up encountering Shroud for the very first time at Eric Jumper's house at his landing on the way down to his basement. We installed the system there and trained him on how to use it. And they handed me a picture and said, we want to see the isometric projection, the 3D mapping of brightness from this instrument. Well, when they showed me the picture, I put it on the table and focused it and brought it up, and fiddling with the knobs on the isometric projection, all of a sudden I'm looking at the contour of a person. And I said, wow, what's this? And they said, Shroud of Turin. I said, great, what's that? So that was my introduction to the Shroud and to John Jackson and Eric Jumper, and they had actually, John Jackson had actually witnessed that image projected that way, processed that way through a VP8 image analyzer in 1975, or perhaps late 75, early 76. I'm not exactly sure of those dates. At Sandia Laboratories in Albuquerque, at Bill Modern's laboratory at Sandia. They decided they put an image of the Shroud into this VP8 image analyzer, and for the very first time anybody saw a real-time full map of the image on the Shroud, and it comes out 3D. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah, what a surprise, and that is definitely one of the big things that happened. And certainly those three names, John Jackson, Bill Modern, Eric Jumper, they are really the three that started, I guess, really this whole STURP research and everything like that.
Yeah, that got a lot of people excited, and especially John Jackson and Bill Modern, and their enthusiasm and excitement was accelerated when John went back to Colorado Springs and showed it to Eric Jumper and some of their colleagues, and one thing led to another, and there's a rapid expansion of interest because this is a unique happening. You take normal images and you process them through a VP8 image analyzer. They don't come out 3D. They come out with a map of brightness, which is little, if any, related to real height or depth until you get to the shroud. And so the first real-time way to view that was quite shocking. And so they began collecting interest from other people by pictures that they were showing of what they had seen down in Sandia Laboratories in Albuquerque.
Well, to me, that 3D image is just as significant as Secundo Pia in 1898, showing that image in black and white when he was taking the first incredibly rough picture of the shroud, you know, back then, which modern technology, but that was really the first, or one of the first black and white images of the shroud, and then this is then probably just as significant.
I would say, if you take a photograph back in the day of Secundo Pia, you're expecting to make a print of what you see, what you're taking a picture of. But when you develop a negative and you get a result like that he got, that's not going to happen with other pictures. It just simply doesn't happen that way. If you look at the total content of what he was taking a picture of, and what you would ultimately expect to get is a print that is what you saw, that's quite shocking to look at the negative and get that result. Well, the same thing is true here. If you are making brightness maps of things, you don't expect them to turn out to have a three-dimensional aspect to them that is truly shocking to look at. I'd say that there are two very modern discoveries about the shroud that occur because of photography and image processing. The first, of course, Secundo Pia in his negative, and the second, of course, equally, I believe, as you were suggesting, equally as shocking, is the three-dimensional image that is produced in the 3D mapping or isometric plotting of the brightness values of the image of the shroud.
So tell us, just to be certain, what is the VP8 image analyzer? What is that?
A VP8 image analyzer is an analog computer that's wired to do certain processes of images that are introduced through a video camera, typically. Its original purpose was to be used in studying Earth resources observation satellite images from Eros Data Center in North Dakota, and other things. It was used for all kinds of different images, maybe even for quality assurance testing on casings or castings, that sort of thing, where you might be looking for brightness variations that tell you something very specific about what it is you're looking at. And so it would extract brightness information from images introduced by a video camera. That's all it did. It was, if you think about that, the way it works, a video camera translates brightness into voltage. The brighter it is, the higher the voltage. The less bright it is, the lower the voltage. And so if you can imagine making an isometric plot of all the brightness values in an image, then that isometric plot just represents the variations in brightness, period. It doesn't, it's like random numbers almost, okay? And if we look at, say a mountain peak, and it's covered with snow, well, that's brighter, so it's going to go up. Well, there you go. Let's go take the same picture in the summer when the snow's melted and the dark rocks are showing very brightly, but dark. Well, it's not going to be anywhere near as bright as it was with the snow cover. So what looked like it was a real high mountain in the winter, it looks like a valley or a hole in the ground in the summer because it's dimmer than the surrounding brightness values, I guess I should say. So that's kind of the way the instrument works. It's wired to do that. It's not, it can't do programmed things like computers do nowadays, where we can manipulate the numbers to make things come out in a particular way. It just takes whatever the camera is putting out as brightness variations and plots them as isometric plot or 3D mapping of brightness.
Yeah, I was surprised. Now, you have in the museum, the Shroud exhibit and museum in Alamogordo, where we are, just down the street. Great place if you get a chance. There's also some news coming up about that, but in the meantime, that museum is awesome, got some great displays. One of the things, though, that you show is an image of Jesus's face versus an image of just a regular picture. And you don't get that same three-dimensional effect as you do in the Shroud image as opposed to the photograph.
Right. Well, if you're taking a photograph of an artwork, it doesn't come out the same way as a photograph of the Shroud. Okay. So if I take a photograph of the Shroud and I make a brightness map of that photograph from the Shroud, then it's going to make a brightness map that's 3D. Now let's take an artwork that was painted or drawn or whatever, sketched. You think of all the different things that have been thrown out there as being possible to make a 3D plot from that comes out like the Shroud. They don't do that.
Yep.
They simply don't do that. And the reason for that is because it's pigment, it's art interpretation of what was seen. It's not actual brightness variations from the Shroud. And I think that's extremely important to know. One might consider that the energy, whatever caused the image that's on the Shroud, that image on the Shroud has brightness variations that are relative to distance, if you really get right down to it. So how do you do that? If you're an artist, why would you do that? I mean, okay, you're trying to contrive a three-dimensional function of brightness variations in what might be considered in some ways a photographic negative form, because if you take a photographic negative of the Shroud, that's when you can see it best. This doesn't make any sense. I mean, there's not a plausible way to think that this is somehow contrived. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, and actually that's the 3D qualities of the Shroud image. If you were going to forge the Shroud image, and if it was a forgery, if it was not the authentic burial cloth of Jesus, then you would have to first of all know how to draw in a three-dimensional way, and that technology or that even consideration, just like a black and white photo, it didn't even exist, hundreds of years ago.
And what would you do? Would you put down the blood first, or would you put down the image first? And by the way, would you put in the weave of the cloth first, or would you do it on a sketch pad? Come on, it's just, it gets so far beyond ludicrous to think that this is anything other than some form of energy or some very different happening that caused this image than anything else. And we have to remember, in this day and age, that was the first selfie ever. Okay, so no matter what you think, it's not Elvis. Okay, it's a picture of Jesus. And my belief and my understanding from the research I've done since 1976 is that that's the world's first selfie. However it was done. Okay.
Yeah. How true, how true. So, and it's funny too, the word selfie hadn't even been discovered yet.
No, they hadn't thought of that at any time concerning the Shroud.
That's so true. So, let's do two things. Let's first of all talk about the Shroud Museum, exhibit and museum here in Alamogordo, and then we can talk as much as you'd like about the current status and what's going to happen here moving forward. So tell us about the museum and why you got started with it and all about that.
Oh, wow. Okay. First of all, the museum, I don't own it. It is a nonprofit 501c3 New Mexico corporation. It is now operated and controlled by a board of directors and so on, and I'm not even on the board of directors. I'm semi-retired now, so I can be a volunteer. I get to do the fun stuff and not the business stuff so much, okay? Which is wonderful. The museum got started because of a common friend here, Barry Schwartz, okay? I moved here to retire in Alamogordo in 2006, and that was my full intention, never to start any other business or a museum or anything else. I came here to retire. Well, okay, I moved here in 2006, and in 2008, in October, I got a call from Barry Schwartz, and he said, I got a call from the Discovery Channel, and they would like to get some video off of a VP8 image analyzer. He said, do you still have one of those? I said, yeah, I got one in my garage. Doesn't everybody? and I said, send them down. Okay, so they came down and we went to our public library here in Alamogordo, and we set up the video, the VP8, and they took video from that VP8 in October of 2008. That was part of a documentary called Unwrapping the Shroud: New Evidence, which aired for the very first time in December of 2008. If you bring a film crew from Discovery Channel to Alamogordo, New Mexico, you're going to raise some eyebrows. And so one of my friends who I knew here happened to be on the Chamber of Commerce and with the Small Business Development Corporation here, and he said, can I see that, you know? I said, sure, I'll hook it up for you. And he says, you need to be showing this somewhere. I said, great, find me a window somewhere on a street and I'll put up a little display, be fine. No, you need to be doing more than that. He presses on me until he finally introduces me to a guy who ran White Sands Mall here in Alamogordo. That's our big shopping mall. And about 15 minutes or half hour into that conversation, he said, would 1,900 square feet be okay? I said, no. I said, I put it in one of the windows of, you know, one of the vacant spaces or something like that if you'd like. He says, I don't care what you do with the rest of the space. Well, I'm beginning to think he wants to rent me a space in the mall, and I can't do that. And I said, I can't afford 1,900 square feet in the mall. He said, I didn't say anything about affording it. So all of a sudden, we're donated 1,900 square feet in White Sands Mall, next to the J.C. Penney store, across from the Hallmark, next to the recruiting station, a prime location, with heat and air conditioning, and that's where we started. And we opened for our first preview to grand opening in early February, and February 29th, we actually had our first grand opening. And had guest speaker Barry Schwartz and some other people. We didn't have much for a display at that time. It was 1,900 square feet with pretty much VP8 image analyzer and the monitors associated with that, and a big picture from Barry Schwartz's archives, research grade. We had to build a light table, everything. It was just an amazing thing. Well, that's all evolved over the years. We're coming up on our 15th anniversary. We were, under the agreement we had with the mall, we were needed to move out of the mall because they had all the spaces rented. And somebody had asked for our space in addition to the space they already had in the mall. And so that was our agreement. If they had a full house, then we would move. So they gave us a notice and we moved. And we were given a space in a building downtown Alamogordo. And so that was, about 7 years ago or something like that. And we moved down to that building and have been operating there until very recently. And about a year ago or so, the building was donated to the Shroud Exhibit and Museum. And about 3 weeks ago now, it was condemned. by the city of Alamogordo because of a structural problem we found when we were trying to utilize some of the other space within the building, and we removed some sheetrock in order to do that expansion, and voila, in the wall there's some structural damage. So that was a big turning point in the history of our progress here. So right now we're trying to figure out what we're going to do for our next home, because we can't be open to the public temporarily until we open up somewhere else. But we're not going to go away. We're going to open up somewhere else, and all of that's in process, and a lot of good help coming along in that regard.
Fantastic. Well, that you have to open back up, and it sounds like you are. And
Thank you.
That is awesome. And now, just as an aside, we've still got a couple of more questions yet, but
Sure.
How can people find you on the internet?
You can go to shroudnm.com. Shroud, NM is for New Mexico, okay? So shroudnm.com. And you can email me through that at pete@shroudnm.com. PETE@shroudnm.com.
Fantastic. And so shroudnm.com. So now getting back to what you have in the museum, obviously you have the VP8 image analyzer, but you have a couple of other things. So in your, what do you think? I know a lot. Yeah, that's right. You have a ton of stuff in there. So what do you think is like your most favorite or most important item that you have in the museum?
Well, we have the only VP8 image analyzer on open and interactive display to the public and available for research. And we have a research grade image that was done by Barry Schwartz, properly illuminated, backlit, uniform lighting, diffuse lighting, all kinds of other things went into that just to make it so that we could do those kinds of things. And we can certainly explain all of those things, and then we have a lot of exhibits about the other things, things that have been studied about the shroud, such as the carbon dating and all of the other wonderful things that are out there concerning the shroud. And then I have some other images of the shroud that I would like to put on display, and we haven't been able to do that so much. When we get a new place, we're hoping we'll be able to do some of that. So.
Fantastic. Now you can accept groups, you can have buses come down, you can give lectures.
Yeah. We can do remote lectures or even we've done missions and retreats and day-long or 3-day-long and multiple talks over 3 days and all kinds of other things, and that all of the proceeds for that go to the museum. So any contribution that's made goes directly to support the museum. But we do those things, and we have a portable exhibit for doing all of that. Yeah, we have had busloads of people come through. We had a couple of busloads that came through from California during youth formation things, and we had another pilgrimage tour that came through, and the primary speaking languages were French, Spanish, and English. So we had 2 interpreters in the museum that we had provided, and myself speaking English. So we had 3 going on all at once. That was very exciting. First time to do that. It was worked out pretty well. They seemed very happy. Got good reviews. So and other groups, busload from Albuquerque, which is about 3.5 hours away. We've had busloads from Tucson. That's where I was trying to think of earlier. That come over. We can accommodate tours. Not so much right now today because the museum's temporarily closed, but we hope to have a little bit larger space next time so that we'd be able to do larger tours and maybe even get to a point where we could do some kind of conference or something else.
Okay, so we talked about the museum.
Yeah.
And we talked about what's in it and some of the really cool stuff. I mean, that image that you have from Barry Schwartz's private collection and then backlit with, with the right kind of lighting and everything. And then, of course, the star of the whole museum is the VP8 image analyzer. So if I were to go to the exhibit and let's say that I am maybe not quite a Christian believer or not, what message would you like to get across that they, when they leave there, what would you like them to come across with?
Well, we hope they've had an encounter with Christ. That's what we hope for, okay? No matter what we think about or talk about concerning the shroud, it's not a picture of Elvis, okay? And so we just try to make it an open exhibit that people can come in and they can learn and experience. They can look at themselves on a VP8 isometric plot of brightness and see if they're 3D or not. You know, just to simply come to understand some of the magnificent research that was done by wonderful scientists with great effort and great review by peers and other things that have been there and available, but are so, shall we say, unfamiliar to the general public. So what we call our mission is to make the Shroud of Turin an experience available to everyone. And let that speak to them. We oftentimes invite them to take their cell phone camera out and do a photographic negative on their cell phone. And when you do that, and you can do that with any serious picture of the shroud, you see what Secundo Pia saw 120 years ago, 1898. And you got to understand that nobody in the world ever saw the shroud that way until that very first photograph was made in 1898. And then you can walk over and look at a VP8 and say, nobody ever saw the shroud that way until 1976 at a laboratory in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So, you know, these are not things that anybody would have planned to do if they were trying to make a forgery. So that get rid of some of this, shall I say, contrived controversy that we kind of see happen oftentimes concerning the shroud, and just let the shroud speak to them truthfully. Yeah, that's kind of where we are.
What a powerful message. So we're recording this right before Christmas.
Oh,
Potentially, to me, you know, the gift of Jesus' birth is certainly up there.
the Lamb of
But
God.
it's the resurrection and I think in all of our minds, that's really the proof of that gift. And the shroud is also the proof of the resurrection.
I believe, yeah, I believe that. We always say it's a proof of the resurrection, but it's also a proven group of evidence concerning everything we read in the Bible. And I mean everything
How
we read
true.
in the Bible concerning Jesus' death and resurrection. So, yeah, you know, you can look at the shroud all day long. It's not Elvis. He's the king, but it's not Elvis the king, okay? So we got to remember that the king is coming. He's coming at Christmas, and we're very happy about that. And let's keep the Christ in Christmas and in our hearts.
Yes, amen, exactly. Well, Pete, thank you. I really appreciate it, and really the opportunity to speak with you, and then just get, you know, your impressions and all of the work that you've done on the shroud. Just wonderful. Thank you so much for that, and certainly the time today. And again, they can reach you at
Pete at shroudnm.com.
and the museum at.
Well, the museum phone number is temporarily down, I think, maybe, but it's on the internet. It's on. You can Google it. You can go to our website. You can find that number in many different ways. Okay.
Yep, and the website is
shroudnm.com.
fantastic. And there is a button on there to donate,
yes.
to visit, to learn. But I think right now, if our viewers and guests would help to donate, that would be a wonderful opportunity to support this
That
great
would
mission.
be awesome, and we so much appreciate it right now, because we are definitely in transition, and we're definitely going to need some help. So thank you for putting that plug in for us. Thank you very
Absolutely.
much.
No, it's such an important mission, and thank you so much for all you've done. So with that, thank you so much again, Pete. And to
Thank
the
you.
audience, please stay tuned for many other videos in this series of the backstory on the Shroud of Turin. And please visit guidepowell.com and sign up for more episodes. And if you like this one, please rate it with 5 stars. Pete, thank you so much.
Thank you. God bless you.
Thank you.